Good evening, constant reader. In the summer of 1976, according to the events detailed in Stephen King's The Children of the Corn, Burt and Vicky Robeson embarked on a road trip from Boston to California, except they never made it to the West Coast. They took a detour in a small town in Nebraska, a pit stop from which they would not return. Their disappearance became a mystery, plagued with questions for decades, leaving us to wonder what became of Mr. and Mrs. Robeson until now.
This was in late July of 1976. Burt and Vicky had been missing for 3 days and not even a phone call. And that was not like my sister.
They said it was vacation, Burt and Vicky. But really, I think they were wanting to patch things up.
This is William and Jane Arnold, the brother and sister-in-law of Vicky Robeson.
She was my kid sister, and I didn't appreciate her enough. Growing up, I wasn't exactly interested in family during my teen years. Our folks they'd drag us around to these church revivals, faith healers, televangelists, that sort of thing. And I hated it. I miss her. I miss her mostly because I didn't get a chance to know her.
I never really knew Burt. I did meet him at the rehearsal dinner, but I didn't really know him. I know that he served in Vietnam. I think he was a medic. Oh, no. He was an orderly, I think at an army hospital. They were happy, I guess, for about 5 years, and then Vicky started talking separation, possibly divorce.
Why do you think she wanted to leave?
Oh, he had a temper. Vicky knew that she always had an open invitation to come visit whenever, and I extended that to Burt too.
Vicky called me from the motel they were staying at. She said that Burt had wanted to take the more scenic route, somewhere off the turnpike. So she said they might be an extra day or two. And that extra day turned into a week.
These are the last known images of Burt and Vicky Robeson. The person who took that photograph was a young woman named Alicia Parquette, also known as Alice. She is Vicky's cousin and lifelong friend.
Alicia. She went by Alice, as in Alice through the looking glass. She was always looking through her camera. She always fancied herself as an investigative reporter.
So Alice calls me from the airport in Omaha, planning to search, every highway, hoping to track her down. So I told her I would do the same, heading out from Ferndale and see if, we could find them or meet in the middle. I don't even know why we thought this was a good idea.
Burt and Vicky Robeson went missing on July 26, 1976. 1 week later, Alice disappeared.
I made it to Cheyenne, then I waited for Alice, and we never found her either, or my sister, or her husband. They're just gone.
All three are presumed dead, though the police never found their remains or any trace of foul play, until, in 2007, decades after the disappearance of the Robesons, there was finally a break in the case. Burt's 1961 Thunderbird was discovered in a withered cornfield just on the edge of a ghost town called Gatlin, Nebraska. A tow truck driver removed the vehicle from the field at the request of the corporation that had recently purchased the property. Back at the shop, it was the truck driver who opened the trunk to discover the skeletal remains of a small child. Based upon the many shattered bones, coroners eventually determined that the boy, no more than 10 years old at the time of his death, had been hit by a vehicle, most likely the Thunderbird. However, some of the mummified remains around the boy's neck region suggested that the victim's throat had been cut. Whether that wound was inflicted before or after the vehicle struck the child has never been determined, but the unidentified boy's death remains an unsolved murder, and Mr. and Mrs. Robeson remain the primary suspects in the case. For a long time there were no leads, until July 2023, almost 50 years after the disappearance of Vicky, Burt, and Alice. Two engineers discovered the remains of a camera, broken, rusted, still inside its case, buried in the middle of a dead cornfield, within the border of the abandoned town once known as Gatlin, Nebraska. The camera, an Olympus Global from the 1970s, was beyond repair, but the film inside was saved, and within the bag the engineers found 5 other film canisters, each one preserved beneath the soil. And now, these images can finally be seen. These are the photographs of Alice Parkett. The first images we see don't match the tone we would expect. Alice is presumably desperate to find her cousin to make sure she is safe, and yet there is a sense of optimism here, a sense of adventure. She is catching glimpses of joy. She's meeting people. She is on a quest. And she is renting a car from the Omaha airport. You can tell through the lens she loves people. After renting the car, it does not take long for Alice to leave behind Omaha and enter the rural countryside of America's heartland. The next set of photos feature friendly faces of people living in the town of Hamburg. It seems as though she is interviewing people, asking if anyone has seen Burt or Vicky or a 1961 Thunderbird. She is trying to find the trail of breadcrumbs that will lead her to her cousin. And apparently she's still feeling a creative spark, because she takes a moment to add some dandelions to the film roll. Here, talking with a fry cook, she may have found the lead she's been hoping for, because now she's on the road again, traveling down Highway 17, a long stretch of road with seemingly endless cornfields on either side. Here's a shot of several strange-looking radio towers. And then, with this next shot, things become puzzling. Here, it seems her rental car has stopped in the middle of the road. And I can't help but wonder if she has run out of gas, because it looks like she continues her journey on foot. Here, she investigates possible clues at the edge of the cornfield. And here, she passes an abandoned gas station. And after an unknown amount of walking, she reaches the city limit sign of Gatlin, Nebraska. According to the 1964 almanac, the town's population was 4,531. And yet, by the 1990s, the town's population was reduced to 0. But Alice knows none of this. She walks toward town. She's inside the city limits, but it's a long time before she's going to reach the town square. First, she passes abandoned farmhouses. Then she encounters this. She takes another photo, but the child is gone. Notice that there hasn't been a photo of traffic Not a single passing car. Guessing by the lighting, it seems she finally arrives in the town proper by the late afternoon, and there's no one to greet her. Just empty storefronts. A diner with all of its furniture and none of its patrons. An abandoned movie house. The last film, according to the marquee, seems to be 1963's Cleopatra. The steps of the library, where all the books seem to have been banished to the outdoors. An empty courthouse. Not a police car in sight, but there are some signs of life in this otherwise lifeless town. After wandering through these streets, Alice must have been relieved at first to find someone to talk to, even if it was just a child. Not just one child, but many, some of them lurking, some of them walking down the street, some of them running to her. Within these photos, you'll notice there are no adults, just children. And at first, they look friendly, but things change. For the first time, Alice seems to lose control of her camera. She's probably taking these shots by accident as she begins to run for her life. It's difficult to say how much time passes, but Alice manages to evade her assailants, and she regains her composure long enough to take this photograph of a church. It's a place she enters, hoping to find sanctuary. Surely by now, Alice is wondering if this very same thing happened to Burt and Vicky. Were they ambushed, held hostage, beaten to death? And what happened to the rest of the townspeople? The decor inside is cryptic, and so is the book she discovers. The snapshot of the book's open pages reveals a list of names and dates. Each name is biblical, from the Old Testament, and in parenthesis seems to be a more secular name. We can see each date of birth recorded, and then a secondary date, the date of a baptism, or perhaps the date of their death. This would mean that each person at the top of the first page died, perhaps was killed, or even sacrificed on the day of their 19th birthday. But then, on July 26, 1976, the same day Burt and Vicky went missing, something in the pattern changes. The rest of the names listed have a different date of death, July 26th. These individuals hadn't reached their 19th birthday. So what happened? Why did things change? Why was this sacrificial pattern altered? And what about the last entry? Japheth, who shall evermore be known as Ahaz, cursed by God. This person was only 8 years old at the time, perhaps the same age as the little boy found dead in the trunk of the Thunderbird. Were the children of Gatlin responsible for his death, as well as everyone else on this list? Still seeking shelter within the church, Alice dares to take another photo, this one depicting a meeting in progress. Desperate to escape, Alice sets fire to the church, perhaps hoping to cause a distraction. But as we can see here, the assailants are still on her trail, so she takes refuge in the cornfield. Here, she makes a grim discovery: the Robeson's vehicle, the Thunderbird that won't be found by authorities for another 4 decades. But for Alice, this must have confirmed her worst fears. Twilight is approaching now, and it becomes evident in these photos that Alice is lost. But at least she seems to have also lost the children, They have not followed her into the cornfield. And yet if we look closely, we can see that she is not alone. Be forewarned that these next photos are highly disturbing, because with the next image, she finds this. Now, whether these are Halloween scarecrows or human remains, it must have been terrifying for Alice. And then the next photo unveils this. Although upright, it is difficult to tell if this person is alive or dead or a fabrication. Is this Vicky? Alice seems to think so, as she is determined to record evidence before again fleeing the scene. These shadowy images make me believe that she was waiting, hiding, perhaps taking photos as a coping mechanism more than anything. And then the wait is over. It's difficult to process what we are seeing as the shadows of the evening fall upon the cornfield. And so I will stop talking and let you decide for yourself. Whoever or whatever that was, whether real or a hoax, as the authorities believe, it seems that darkness follows the next shot. As a black canvas, which we can't help but interpret as death, full dark, no stars. When looking at these for the first time, I thought that this would be the last image on the roll, but I was wrong. Morning has arrived. I had hoped that Alice was behind the camera taking this photo, but that does not seem to be the case. This is the boy behind the camera, and these are the children of Gatlin, entering the cornfield almost in a procession, a ritual, a culture of their own creation. Have you seen these photographs that are supposedly by Alice?
I haven't seen them, and I don't want to see them. They say that they're disturbing, and I don't. I want to think that Alice was happy.
Do you know anything about the images on them?
I know the first photo shows a group of children laughing. I think the last photo shows a group of kids laughing. Alice loved kids. That gives me some comfort.
I have seen these photos, Constant Reader. So have you. I think you'll agree. They do not bring comfort. Thank you for watching and listening to the Stephen King Book Club. If you enjoyed this exploration of Stephen King's tale, then you will definitely want to read Children of the Corn by Stephen King in his collection Night Shift.